There are tragedies that cannot be buried. There are secrets that cannot remain forgotten forever. 4 years ago, Jerome lost everything: the wife he loved, the baby girl he once held in his arms. But just when the past seemed to have been washed away by the river, a horrifying truth begins to resurface. Once upon a time, in a peaceful countryside in the state of Georgia, USA, there was a community of African-American farmers living along the Chattahoochee River. Every early morning, a light mist gently settled over the grass, accompanied by the melodious chirping of birds, signaling the beginning of a new day. Across the vast fields, corn and cotton stretched towards the sun, interwoven with herds of livestock leisurely grazing. From generation to generation, they preserved their traditions, from family gatherings around the dining table to rural festivals and celebrations. In this small community, there was a man named Jerome, standing out with his tall, strong build, deep brown skin, and warm eyes. He was beloved for his hard work and honesty. Jerome lived in an old wooden house, surrounded by vegetable beds and fruit trees. Though he was not wealthy, he was always generous in welcoming friends or even strangers who happened to stop by. His friendliness and hospitality were ingrained in his way of life, making those who met Jerome for the first time quickly grow fond of him. Speaking of Jerome, one could not forget Selena, his kind and gentle wife. Whenever her name was mentioned, Jerome's eyes would light up with an indescribable happiness. Selena was a modest and warm-hearted woman, but she was also known throughout the community for her exceptional cooking. At church gatherings or summer festivals, her dishes were always admired and praised. With her dedication to the kitchen and family meals, she became the heart of their simple yet joy-filled life together. Their happiness doubled when Selena became pregnant with their first child. Excitement and nervous anticipation intertwined as Jerome worked tirelessly. He spent long hours on the fields, not only to earn extra money, but also meticulously repairing their wooden house, transforming a small corner into a cozy nursery for the baby. Every night, under the moonlight reflecting on the river, he would sit quietly on the porch, humming lullabies, imagining a warm future where tiny footsteps would joyfully run across the yard. However, life often holds unpredictable sorrows. On the day Selena went into labor, despite all the efforts of the midwife in the village, she could not be saved. The moment the newborn let out its first cry was also the moment Selena breathed her last. Jerome sat in stunned silence, holding his fragile baby girl in his arms, his weathered face drenched in tears. His heart felt as though it had shattered, yet amidst his grief, he found a small comfort in looking at his little angel. He named her Savannah, carrying the hope that she would grow strong and gentle, just like the Chattahoochee River, the very place where their family's story began. After Selena's funeral, Jerome's small house was weighed down by an unbearable sorrow. Every corner bore traces of her presence, yet now only an aching emptiness remained. The apron, still faintly scented with spices, hung in the kitchen. The unfinished embroidery cushion lay abandoned on the porch, all silent remnants of a happiness that had been shattered. At night, the house that was once filled with laughter now echoed only with the sound of the wind seeping through the cracks in the door, cold and desolate. During those somber days, Savannah, the little daughter Selena left behind, became the only anchor keeping Jerome from drowning in his grief. Her round, innocent eyes reflected the image of the mother she would never know. Every time Jerome looked into them, he felt as if Selena was still there, watching over him and their child from some distant place. For the sake of his daughter, he forced himself to carry on, trying his best to ensure she never felt unloved. But no matter how hard he tried, he could not escape the truth. He could not be both a father and a mother. The community whispered. Some pitied him, while others murmured in hushed voices. He's still young. He'll remarry soon, they speculated. Some older women expressed concern. Others were simply curious, wondering who he would choose as his new wife. Among all the rumours, only Malik, Jerome's closest friend, offered him genuine advice. "Don't rush," he said. "Raise your daughter with all your love. Don't let people's words pressure you." But then, only a few months after Selena's passing, Jerome made a shocking announcement. He was getting remarried. The woman he chose was Lucinda, a stranger from Maryland whom he had met while purchasing farming tools. The community was stunned. They couldn't understand why he had decided so quickly. They worried, they questioned. Did Lucinda truly love him? Would she accept Savannah as her own child? That evening, Malik visited his friend, his heart heavy with doubt. When he arrived, he found Jerome quietly rocking Savannah to sleep. Unable to hold back his concern any longer, he asked, "Are you sure about this?" His voice was firm. "Selena's grave is still fresh, and you're already remarrying." Jerome clenched his hands, his deep-set eyes clouded with exhaustion. "I have no other choice, Malik," he sighed. "I can't raise Savannah alone. She needs a mother. I trust that Lucinda can be that for her." Malik remained silent for a long moment, studying his friend's face. In Jerome's expression, he saw not just determination, but also a quiet, unspoken fear. A desperation that perhaps even Jerome himself didn't fully realize. Finally, Malik exhaled, placing a reassuring hand on his friend's shoulder. "I hope you're right, and I hope she will love Savannah as if she were her own." Jerome and Lucinda's wedding took place hastily, much like their relationship itself. It was a serene afternoon by the Chattahoochee River, the very place where Selena had once loved to watch the last rays of the sun disappear into the still waters. Occasionally, a gentle breeze swept through, carrying the fresh scent of grass and an unspoken sense of longing. A handful of neighbours and close friends gathered there, forcing smiles as they offered their blessings to the newlyweds. Lucinda, in her white dress, stood out against her sun-kissed skin, undeniably beautiful, yet there was an unmistakable coldness beneath her smile. Her slender figure and carefully made-up face were striking, but her eyes held a depth that was difficult to decipher. At first, Lucinda left no bad impression. She stood beside Jerome, occasionally holding little Savannah, Selena's precious daughter, and gently stroking the soft curls that still carried the sweet scent of milk. In front of everyone, she spoke affectionately, portraying herself as a devoted stepmother, ready to take on the responsibility. Even Jerome felt a fleeting sense of relief. He wanted to believe that, with time, Lucinda would grow to love and care for Savannah. It was a fragile hope, born from a man who had already suffered too great a loss and could not bear the thought of raising his child alone. But it wasn't long before Lucinda's true nature began to reveal itself. The innocent cries of a baby, something so natural, soon became an unbearable nuisance to her. Each night, when Savannah whimpered in her sleep, Lucinda's patience wore thin. She would grumble, "That child never stops crying. I can't sleep. Can't you make her stop?" The irritation in her voice and the sharpness in her gaze left Jerome unsettled. He tried to soothe both his daughter and his wife, convincing himself that Lucinda was simply adjusting to her new life. "She will love Savannah in time," he reassured himself, clinging desperately to the fragile hope that things would change. But with each passing day, Lucinda's tolerance for Savannah grew weaker. In the morning, she forced a half-hearted smile when Jerome was around, but by the afternoon, her resentment spilled out in whispered complaints in the dimly lit kitchen. "I'm not some babysitter. I got married for a happy life, not to raise another woman's child." The words, spoken carelessly, struck Jerome like a blade to the chest. He knew things weren't going as he had hoped, but fear of being alone once again kept him silent. He wavered between confronting Lucinda and ignoring the bitter truth that had begun to take root in his home. Savannah, in her innocent world, could not understand why her stepmother often stared at her with such a chilling gaze. She remained blissfully unaware, her big round eyes still bright with curiosity, occasionally breaking into spontaneous giggles or soft sobs. She had no idea that her small, helpless cries irritated Lucinda to the point of quiet rage. The bond that should have formed between them never had the chance to grow. In fact, it seemed irreparably fractured before it could even begin. The house, once filled with Selina's warmth, now carried an oppressive silence, thickening whenever Lucinda entered the room. The riverside wedding at Chattahoochee faded quickly from people's memories, leaving behind only whispers of doubt about the future of Jerome and Savannah. How many more tears would fall? How many sleepless nights and bitter complaints lay ahead before they found any semblance of peace? Jerome himself did not know. He could only pray for a miracle, that Lucinda would, in time, learn to love Savannah, or at the very least stop resenting the innocent child. Yet in that harsh moment, a miracle felt like a distant, unreachable thing. That afternoon was so stiflingly hot that even the roadside grass seemed to bow under the oppressive heat. Since early morning, thin streaks of clouds had been etched across the sky, foretelling an unpleasant day ahead. Inside the old wooden house, Lucinda wiped the sweat from her brow and suddenly turned to Jerome, her voice honeyed. "Jerome, let's go to the river. Little Savannah would surely enjoy the cool breeze." Jerome, who was busy mending the rope of Savannah's cradle, immediately looked up at her. He smiled warmly. Her suggestion seemed like a wonderful idea. Since her birth, Savannah had barely left the confines of their four walls, especially after Selina's passing, which had cast an even heavier gloom over the home. The thought of taking his daughter out for fresh air filled him with relief. He quickly gathered a few essentials into a cloth bag, lifted Savannah into his arms, and followed Lucinda down the path. Though sweat had already soaked through the back of his shirt, he still forced a smile. It had been so long since Lucinda had voluntarily suggested anything involving Savannah. Deep down, he clung to the hope that perhaps she was finally beginning to accept the child. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting golden flecks along the dusty path leading to the Chattahoochee River. This river had always been gentle, winding through the land where Jerome's family had lived for generations. As a boy, he and Selina had watched the sunsets here, listening to the rhythmic lapping of the water against the shore. Many nights they had walked home under the soft embrace of moonlight, their love woven into the quiet symphony of nature. But today the river appeared more vibrant than usual. The sun's golden rays shimmered upon its calm surface, scattering reflections like silver scales across the ripples. The scent of wild grass mingled with the damp breeze, drifting through the air in soothing waves. Jerome carefully spread a blanket over the soft earth and gently laid Savannah down. The baby stirred, her sleepy eyes fluttering against the afternoon warmth. But as soon as the cool wind caressed her chubby cheeks, she let out a delighted giggle. For the first time in what felt like forever, Jerome felt the weight on his heart lift slightly. He sat beside his daughter, watching her tiny hands reach for the sky. Then he turned to Lucinda, his eyes filled with quiet yearning, hoping, praying that she would learn to love Savannah. He was tired of the harsh glances, the cold indifference. An hour passed in peaceful silence. Only the whisper of the river and Savannah's soft breathing filled the space between them. Then, unexpectedly, Lucinda spoke. "Darling, could you go beyond those bushes and gather some herbs for me? I heard they make a wonderful soup." Jerome hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. He knew that a particular herb, popular among local women, grew in this area and was often used for cooling broths. He gently placed a hand on Lucinda's shoulder. "Watch over Savannah for me, all right? I'll be back soon." Lucinda nodded, a thin smile playing on her lips, just enough to keep suspicion at bay. Without a second thought, Jerome walked away, disappearing behind the rustling foliage. The moment his figure vanished, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavier. Lucinda turned her gaze toward Savannah, who lay on the blanket, her tiny feet kicking at passing clouds. The child had no idea of the dark intentions swirling in the mind of the woman beside her. The sweetness on Lucinda's face evaporated, replaced by an icy glare. Slowly, she bent down and lifted Savannah into her arms. The baby cooed, her little mouth forming what could have been the beginning of a soft papa. But Lucinda did not smile. She stepped closer to the river's edge, where the water deepened and swirled in unseen currents. The humid breeze brushed against Lucinda's skin, its dampness clinging to her like a final warning. Yet the darkness inside her had already consumed whatever shred of conscience remained. Without hesitation, she gripped Savannah tighter, then, in one swift motion, flung her into the churning depths. Savannah's cry was brief and fragile, swallowed almost instantly by the murky water. The Chattahoochee River, so peaceful mere moments ago, now became a ravenous beast, devouring the child's final sound. White foam churned, ripples crashed upon one another. Then, silence. A terrifying, absolute silence. Lucinda took a slow, trembling breath, allowing the coldness of what she had done to seep into her bones. No more cries, no more innocent laughter, just the deafening quiet, stretching into infinity like a shadow engulfing the last remnants of her humanity. Far beyond the trees, Jerome remained bent over, searching for leaves in the undergrowth, blissfully unaware that tragedy had just shattered his world. The stifling afternoon had become even more suffocating. The air grew thick with an unbearable tension. By the banks of the Chattahoochee, a nightmare had just begun, one that would unleash sorrow and regret beyond measure. Lucinda had just thrown little Savannah into the river when she hurriedly scrambled up the shore, frantically rubbing dirt and sand onto her body, making her hair look tangled and disheveled. Her dress was torn in a few places, creating the perfect image of a woman in utter distress. Her face was pale, her dry eyes blinking rapidly. Then suddenly, she burst into desperate sobs, forcing out anguished cries as though overcome with grief. At that very moment, Jerome emerged from the thick brush, still holding the bundle of herbs Lucinda had sent him to collect. His steps faltered as he caught sight of his wife, collapsed in terror on the riverbank. His heart pounded violently. He dropped the herbs to the ground and rushed to her side, gripping her trembling shoulders. "What happened? Where's Savannah?" His voice quivered, nearly breaking under the weight of his dread. Sweat beaded on his forehead, fueled by an overwhelming fear. Lucinda played her part well, clutching at Jerome's arm with one hand while covering her face with the other, her expression streaked with dirt and feigned tears. She sobbed, her cries scattered and uneven, but soaked in dramatic urgency. I tried to hold on to her, but Savannah slipped from my grasp. The current was too strong. I couldn't save her." Her voice broke as though she had just witnessed an unimaginable tragedy. For a moment, Jerome was paralyzed. His eyes darted toward the Chattahoochee River, where the murky water churned and swirled. Just minutes ago, Savannah had been giggling on the blanket, and now his daughter was gone, swallowed somewhere beneath those relentless waves. His mind reeled. His entire world crumbled in an instant. A strangled cry formed in his throat, but it never fully escaped. Only a raw, silent agony filled the suffocating afternoon air. Jerome collapsed onto his knees, his wide, frantic eyes locked onto the river's surface. He screamed Savannah's name, his voice echoing into the wind before vanishing into the unforgiving current. His chest felt as though 1,000 knives were piercing through it, pain, regret, and utter helplessness clawing at his soul. "Savannah, my baby!" His hoarse, grief-stricken voice carried through the air, capable of breaking the heart of anyone who heard it. Despite knowing it was futile, he lurched forward, intent on diving in, but Lucinda's hands shot out, gripping his shoulders to stop him. She clung to him, not out of concern but out of fear that his actions might unravel her deception, or at the very least, She pretended to be protecting him from a reckless attempt to retrieve what was already lost. His cries drew the attention of nearby villagers who hurried toward the scene. Faces filled with shock and pity, they took in the devastation before them. Lucinda sprawled on the ground, dishevelled and wailing, recounting how Savannah had slipped from her grasp. They saw Jerome, crushed by sorrow, and their expressions softened. No one dared to question Lucinda's account. Instead, they shook their heads, murmuring among themselves, "Poor Savannah, poor Jerome." Some gazed out at the water, searching for any sign of a miracle, but the river gave nothing back, no answer, no solace. As night descended, the villagers had no choice but to leave, knowing there was nothing more to be done. One neighbour placed a comforting hand on Jerome's shoulder. "Come home, Jerome. There's nothing more you can do." But the words only deepened the ache in his chest. His mind tormented him with endless what-ifs. What if I had never left her? What if I hadn't blindly trusted Lucinda? Yet when he looked at his wife's hollow, distant expression, he forced himself to believe. She must be suffering too. Finally, Jerome returned to his home, but it was no longer a home. It was a hollow shell, void of warmth. The laughter of Selina had long since faded, and now the cries of Savannah had vanished too. The tiny cradle remained, the soft blanket Selina had picked out for her daughter still draped inside, mute reminders of a life that had been there, and now was gone. For nights on end, Jerome barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Savannah's face, her innocent eyes floating just beneath the river's surface, haunting his dreams. He would wake in a cold sweat, his pulse hammering in his chest, as if his heart might explode from the torment. And then came the doubts, small at first, whispering in the back of his mind. Was Lucinda really careless, or was there more to it? Sometimes a dark thought flickered through his consciousness, but each time he forced it away. He couldn't bear to face the possibility of another loss. The fear of abandonment, the wounds of losing Selina, and now the unbearable grief of losing his child. Everything had shattered him. He repeated the same words to himself over and over. If only I hadn't left Savannah. If only I hadn't trusted Lucinda. But it was the fear of being alone that kept him from seeking the truth. Night after night, the house suffocated in the weight of mourning. Outside, the Chattahoochee River continued its endless journey, indifferent and serene, as if it had never stolen a life from Jerome's arms. And Jerome, broken and lost, could only cling to the faintest, most desperate hope that some miracle might return his daughter to him, or at the very least, grant him escape from this unbearable agony. Time, like a double-edged sword, could both soothe wounds and make pain linger even more deeply. Since little Savannah had vanished beneath the Chattahoochee River, each passing day carved another scar into Jerome's heart. The warmth in his eyes gradually faded, and his broad shoulders, once strong enough to bear the weight of the world, now slumped under the burden of immeasurable grief. The old wooden house, once filled with laughter and love, was now cloaked in silence, so heavy at times that it was suffocating. At first, Lucinda played the role of the grieving wife well. For a few days, she stayed close to Jerome, sighing wistfully, gently running her fingers through his hair, whispering words like, "Everything will be okay," or "I understand your pain." But her tenderness was fleeting, vanishing almost as quickly as it had appeared. Within a day or two, she stopped mentioning Savannah altogether. She neither mourned nor reminisced, treating the tragedy at the riverbank as though it were nothing more than an unfortunate accident, one that wasn't worth dwelling on. Whenever Jerome brought up their daughter's name, Lucinda either changed the subject or dismissed him coldly, saying, "You need to forget and move on." Her indifference unsettled Jerome even further. Inside his shattered soul, two conflicting thoughts waged war. On one hand, he blamed himself for trusting his wife too much and failing to protect his child. On the other, he feared being alone. There were moments when he wanted to question Lucinda about that fateful afternoon in greater detail, but every time he met her vacant, expressionless eyes, he hesitated. The fear of losing what little warmth remained in their fragile marriage held him back from seeking the truth. Then, one moonlit night, everything changed. The full moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale golden glow over the landscape. A light breeze drifted through the open window, carrying the faint hum of crickets. Lucinda, fast asleep, suddenly jolted awake. Sweat dampened her forehead, her breath ragged as though she had just escaped a terrible nightmare. In the dimly lit room, she sat frozen, listening intently. Her heart pounded against her ribcage because she could hear it, faint but unmistakable. The soft, distant cry of a baby. She bolted upright, eyes darting around the room. Apart from the bed pressed against the wooden wall, the darkness remained still and unbroken. The window was slightly ajar, allowing a sliver of moonlight to spill in. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the crying stopped. All that remained was the quiet chirping of crickets outside in the grass. Lucinda shivered, her skin prickling with unease. She couldn't explain what had just happened. After a while, she forced herself to lie back down, pulling the blanket over her head, convincing herself that exhaustion was playing tricks on her mind. But the eerie occurrence repeated itself. The following night, she heard the crying again. This time, it shook her so badly that she let out a shriek, waking Jerome from his restless sleep. In his drowsy confusion, he sat up and asked, "What's wrong? I didn't hear anything." Lucinda's face was ashen, her voice trembling. I heard Savannah crying." The mere mention of the sacred name silenced Jerome. He exhaled a deep, heavy breath before finally responding. "You're overthinking it. You're exhausted. Go back to sleep." He sounded weary, as if he believed it to be nothing more than a lingering nightmare haunting Lucinda's mind after their loss. And yet, even Jerome himself found no peace in sleep. Night after night he dreamt of Savannah. In his dreams, she would appear near the misty banks of the Chattahoochee, her tiny hands reaching out for him, pleading for comfort. Her eyes, still innocent and full of life, seemed to beg for salvation, or worse, accuse him of abandoning her in those final moments. Each time he dreamt of her, he awoke in a cold sweat, heart pounding as though it might explode from grief and guilt. He would sit in silence, staring out into the darkness beyond the window, swallowed by the emptiness of his thoughts. Sometimes he would glance at Lucinda, noticing how she too would toss and turn. But most nights she merely turned away, feigning deep sleep, or rejecting any attempt at comfort. Jerome realized that a chasm had formed between them, one that even shared sorrow could not bridge. Both were trapped in their own nightmares, unable to escape the darkness that followed them. The house, once a home, now felt like a prison of despair. By day, Jerome buried himself in work, forcing his mind away from the past. Meanwhile, Lucinda wandered aimlessly, cleaning here and there, but often sitting in eerie stillness, her vacant eyes drifting toward the river as though something unseen was watching her. By night, the house was filled with restless spirits, Lucinda tormented by cries only she could hear, and Jerome haunted by the ghostly presence of his daughter's small cold hands reaching for him in his sleep. Grief, guilt, fear and sorrow intertwined like vines, creating an impenetrable wall between them and any hope of peace. 4 years had passed since the tragic incident at the banks of the Chattahoochee River, and Jerome had changed so much that he was barely recognizable as the kind and warm-hearted man he once was. Deep lines of hardship were etched into his face, and his eyes carried an unshakable sorrow. His smile had long disappeared, replaced by a quiet demeanor and a rigid, weary posture, like a man burdened with a wound that would never heal. Each day he buried himself in labor, working tirelessly in the cotton fields and cornfields, sowing and tending to crops, as if hard work alone could momentarily distract him from reality. Meanwhile, Lucinda had long abandoned any pretense of tenderness or the effort of being a dutiful wife. She grew more irritable, especially after realizing she could not conceive. Years of marriage without a child gnawed at her mind, feeding her fears that Jerome would eventually cast her aside. The tension between them grew heavier with time, pushing her into a state of frustration and paranoia. Some days, instead of greeting her husband when he returned home drenched in sweat, she would simply purse her lips and stare blankly out the window, as if trying to escape the suffocating reality of their life together. Day by day, they shared a house, but not a life. Their meals became hurried affairs, and sometimes Lucinda skipped them altogether, citing exhaustion before waving him off dismissively. Jerome never complained. He simply cleaned up in silence before returning to his work. Deep inside, he was consumed by endless guilt over Savannah, the daughter he had failed to protect. The weight of the past and his uncertainties about the future left him no space to dwell on Lucinda's infertility or their crumbling marriage. That afternoon, Georgia was struck by a searing heatwave. The sky burned like a furnace, the ground cracked underfoot, and the scent of dry grass hung thick in the air. Lucinda lounged in an old wicker chair, lazily fanning herself, her lips pursed in irritation at the heat. Then suddenly she snapped, "Jerome, I'm too exhausted. Go to the river and fetch some water. We're out." Her tone was sharp, her words more of a command than a request. Jerome said nothing, merely rose to his feet, grabbed the large water can, and walked out the door. He knew the route to the river was difficult, the path winding and sparsely travelled, but he had grown used to Lucinda's coldness and unpredictable moods over the years. As he walked along the narrow dirt path, Jerome barely noticed the world around him. The relentless sun beat down on his bronze skin, beads of sweat rolling down his face. The stifling wind carried the arid scent of the earth. Every now and then, an old memory of Savannah would flicker in his mind, her tiny hands reaching for him, her laughter ringing through their home. But the thought was too painful, so he forced himself to push it away. Finally, he reached the riverbank. The water level was high this season, though the current remained gentle. Jerome knelt down, setting the can beside him, preparing to fill it. Just then, a tiny voice, soft and hesitant, broke through the air, barely audible above the whispering wind. "Mister, please help me." Jerome froze. Slowly he turned around. Before him stood a little girl, no more than 4 years old. Her short, curly hair was tangled and dusty, her worn dress tattered and stained, and her small, bare feet were cracked from wandering who knew where for too long. But what caught his breath most of all were her eyes, big, round, and filled with a sorrowful mix of fear and longing. Jerome's heart clenched. Savannah had once looked at him the same way. His voice came out unsteady but gentle. "Who are you, child? Why are you out here all alone?" The little girl hesitated, her long lashes wet with unshed tears, as if blinking would cause them to spill. I don't remember my name or where my home is. I'm lost. I don't know where my mama and papa are." Her words pierced through Jerome's heart like a blade. Memories of Selena's warmth, Savannah's innocent laughter, and the crushing loss he had carried for years all flooded back at once. The sun bore down, unforgiving and relentless. But in that moment, Jerome felt something shift within him, a tender, unspoken connection forming between him and the child. He knelt down, meeting her gaze with all the kindness he could muster. "My name is Jerome. If you have nowhere to go, I'll take you home with me." His voice wavered slightly, caught between past regrets and an unfamiliar hope. He feared what bringing this child into his life might mean, yet he also felt an undeniable pull, as if fate had placed her before him for a reason. The little girl hesitated for a moment before giving a small nod. Then, without a word, Her tiny, dirt-streaked hand reached for his, slipping into his calloused palm with quiet trust. And as Jerome held that small hand in his own, a fragile sense of comfort settled over him. It was as if, after years of wandering in the darkness, a flicker of light had finally found its way back to him. The relentless Georgia sun still blazed overhead, but for the first time in a long while, Jerome felt warmth inside him. Not from the heat, but from something far more profound. A quiet miracle had just unfolded before him, and he wasn't sure why, but he knew he had to follow where it led. Jerome carefully held the little girl's hand as they walked along the narrow path leading to the old wooden house where he had lived for years. The afternoon sun was still scorching, and the wind swirled around, carrying the dry scent of burnt grass. As the two of them approached the gate, Lucinda sat on the porch steps, lazily fanning herself with a palm leaf fan, her face clearly showing irritation from the heat. When she saw her husband leading an unfamiliar child, she froze for a moment, her eyes flashing with surprise and a hint of curiosity. At first, Lucinda attempted to appear friendly. She stood up, observing the little girl with more curiosity than affection. But the moment Jerome introduced her, "The child doesn't remember anything, she was probably abandoned." Lucinda's expression immediately darkened. The initial warmth disappeared, replaced by an eerie silence. She fanned herself more aggressively, then turned away without bothering to ask the girl a single question. By late afternoon, Jerome led the child into the kitchen for dinner. They sat around an old wooden table, where only a flickering oil lamp provided dim light. Lucinda placed a few cornbread pieces and boiled greens on the table, looking fatigued and indifferent toward their new guest. The little girl sat close to Jerome, her eyes filled with hesitation and worry. In the heavy silence, Jerome spoke in a gentle, reassuring tone, trying to ease the tension. "We don't know your name, and we don't know where your home is, so for now we'll call you Faith. Is that okay?" The girl lifted her head, her large eyes flickering with a small glimmer of light before she nodded softly. She then nibbled on a piece of cornbread, but ate sparingly, as if afraid to take more. From that night on, Faith became a part of their household. Each morning, she would wake up early and sit cross-legged on the porch, gazing at the vast cotton fields stretching before her. She wasn't as playful or demanding as other children, never asking for anything, simply carrying out small tasks whenever Jerome asked. But Lucinda was different. She seemed to resent the presence of Faith in their home, perhaps because of a vague fear that this nameless child would steal away Jerome's attention or add to the burdens of their already strained life. As days passed, Lucinda made every effort to drive Faith away. Sometimes she scolded the girl over trivial matters. Other times, she assigned her tasks far beyond her strength, carrying heavy bundles of firewood or hauling water buckets too large even for an adult. On occasion, Lucinda would deliberately throw objects around the house and blame Faith, forcing her to kneel and clean up the mess. Those who happened to witness these moments couldn't help but sigh with pity. But Faith never cried or complained. She simply nodded and quietly did as she was told, never uttering a single word of protest. It was this extraordinary patience that made Jerome's heart ache. Each time he saw Faith struggling to carry a heavy water basin, he was reminded of Savannah, the daughter he had lost. A deep sorrow, mixed with regret, welled up inside him, as if this was his chance to redeem himself for his past mistakes. Late at night, after long days of exhausting farm work, Jerome would return home to find Faith sitting quietly on the porch, waiting for him. She never spoke much, just greeted him with a small, gentle smile and bright, longing eyes. Her quiet obedience made him want to protect her, to provide for this orphaned child. Slowly, his feelings for Faith grew deeper. He began buying her little hair clips, teaching her how to sew, and patiently showing her how to water the corn and cotton in the garden. The stronger the bond between Jerome and Faith became, the more furious Lucinda grew. Never before had she seen her husband care so much for someone else. Every free moment, Jerome spent it with Faith, no longer paying attention to Lucinda. From irritation, her emotions escalated into bitterness, leading to resentful and spiteful words. When gossiping with neighbors, Lucinda didn't hesitate to say, "That girl Faith, I don't even know where she came from. She just showed up out of nowhere, bringing bad luck to this family." Some people hesitated upon hearing this. Some believed Lucinda's words, while others felt sorry for Faith. But everyone understood that what mattered most was Jerome's stance. Day by day, the tension in the wooden house grew heavier. Lucinda was like a ticking time bomb, while Faith endured everything in silence. As for Jerome, he ignored the rumors and Lucinda's constant complaints. The only thing he cared about was ensuring Faith wasn't hurt, that the innocence in her eyes remained intact. He was ready to shield her from Lucinda's outbursts, ready to stand in her defense. Deep down, he felt that Faith was the light that fate had sent to help him walk out of the darkness that had consumed his life for so long. And as if it were the most natural thing in the world, Jerome began to love Faith as though she were his own daughter. Meanwhile, Lucinda, sinking further into a cycle of jealousy and resentment, had no idea what consequences her growing hatred might bring. That night, the Georgia sky deepened into a somber hue, with the moon peeking through the drifting clouds. Jerome left his old wooden house with heavy steps, his mind tangled in memories of Selena and Savannah. He often found solace by the Chattahoochee River on such quiet nights, where only the murmur of the water and the rustling grass accompanied him. There he could reflect on the past and have silent conversations with the wife and daughter he had lost. As he walked, the faint breeze brushed against his face, carrying the damp scent of the earth and the withering wild grass. Jerome moved forward, his gaze locked on the darkened riverbank, a place so familiar, yet now filled with unbearable sorrow. Years ago, he and Selena had watched sunsets here, listening to the birds returning to their nests. He had once held Savannah's tiny hands, guiding her first steps on the soft grass. Now, those cherished memories had turned into an unrelenting ache, for everything had been swept away by the merciless current. Reaching the river's edge, Jerome sat down on a large rock jutting over the water. The cool night air made the river's surface ripple gently, casting faint reflections of the dim moonlight. He placed a hand over his chest, feeling the dull ache that always resurfaced whenever he thought about the day Savannah was taken from his arms. Under the vast starry sky, his grief settled like sediment, silent, yet unbearably heavy. Lost in his thoughts, his eyes suddenly caught a glimmer of light near the riverbank. Frowning, he moved closer. Something was wedged between the cracks of the rock, glistening faintly under the moon's glow. Instinctively, he reached out and carefully retrieved it. It was a tiny silver bracelet. Holding it up to the light, he noticed two engraved initials, SV. For a moment, time stood still. His heart pounded as a long-forgotten image surfaced. Savannah. Years ago, Selena had lovingly crafted this bracelet, believing it would protect their daughter. They had treated it as a talisman, a symbol of their hopes and prayers for Savannah's safety. Now, standing under the moonlit sky, Jerome's hands trembled as he held the fragile remnant of a life he thought was long gone. His mind spun wildly. Why is it here after all these years? Questions flooded his thoughts, his pulse quickening. A reckless, desperate idea flickered in his mind. Could Savannah still be alive? Did someone find this and drop it here? Stumbling back home, Jerome felt like a ghost drifting through his own world. The moment he stepped into the dimly lit kitchen, he tossed the bracelet onto the wooden table in front of Lucinda. Under the flickering oil lamp, he caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Shock? Hesitation? He didn't wait for her to speak before his voice, weak but heavy with emotion, broke the silence. "I found this by the river." Lucinda's gaze flickered to the bracelet, and in an instant her expression hardened. The change was so quick that Jerome barely caught it. She stammered, "Savannah used to wear that, but she was taken by the river. The waves must have washed it ashore." She seemed to force herself into a sorrowful tone, but something about her eyes was off, as if she was hiding something beneath the surface. Taking a deep breath, she suddenly snapped, her voice sharp and almost commanding. "You're letting your grief cloud your judgment. Savannah is gone. Let her rest in peace."
Jerome stood frozen, stunned by her sudden aggression. Shouldn't she have broken down in tears at the sight of their child's lost possession? Shouldn't she have at least shown sorrow? But no. Lucinda's frustration felt more like a dismissal, a hurried attempt to bury any trace of hope he might have. Her eyes gleamed with an unspoken warning, daring him to drop the subject immediately. A storm of emotions crashed over him: confusion, suspicion, agony, and fear. Never before had he questioned Lucinda's account of that tragic day, but tonight, the tiny silver bracelet had ignited a spark in his mind, revealing cracks in the story he had accepted for years. Was Savannah truly gone? The question echoed in his chest, making his heart pound harder, his palms sweat. But the terror of shattering what little peace remained kept him from pushing further. He inhaled deeply, picked up the bracelet, and clenched it tightly in his fist, as though holding on to Savannah's spirit. In the end, he simply nodded, swallowing his doubts along with the lump in his throat, and let silence take over. Outside, the night remained eerily still, the sound of crickets humming through the thick air. The tiny silver bracelet lay hidden in his pocket, a fragile relic that refused to let Jerome forget. The questions it raised would not be silenced, no matter how much he tried to push them away. The morning sky was soft and hazy, with the golden sunlight casting a warm glow over the distant cornfields. The air, seemingly peaceful, was about to grow heavier than ever. Malik, his face a mixture of sorrow and fury, strode into Jerome's yard with firm determination. His sharp gaze scanned the wooden door where Lucinda stood with her arms crossed, as if she had been waiting. The gentle breeze did nothing to ease the tension in the air. It only intensified the impending confrontation. "Wake up, Jerome!" Malik nearly shouted, pointing directly at Lucinda. His voice was urgent, trembling with anger. "I believe Lucinda had something to do with Savannah's disappearance. She lied. There's no way a 6-month-old baby just drifted away like that in broad daylight." His accusation exploded like thunder, shattering the suffocating silence surrounding the house. It was not a reckless statement. It carried years of built-up suspicion and frustration. Jerome, already torn between his grief and growing doubts, turned pale. His voice wavered with turmoil as he shot back, "Malik, don't let your jealousy cloud your judgment. Just because my wife is more beautiful than yours doesn't give you the right to make baseless accusations." He raised his voice as if shouting would drown out the creeping uncertainty within him. For years, he had carried the weight of losing Savannah, yet he feared that uncovering the truth would destroy the fragile peace he had left. Hearing Jerome's defense, Malik's fury only grew. He lunged forward, landing a hard punch to Jerome's chest. A fight erupted in the middle of the yard, shattering the morning's tranquility. Malik swung, Jerome retaliated, two former brothers now clashing like bitter enemies. Grunts, stomping feet, and ragged breaths filled the air as startled neighbors rushed over to break them apart. Dust swirled around them, caught in the whirlwind of their struggle. Even as hands pulled them apart, their fists continued flying. It was only when someone's desperate voice rang out, "Jerome! Malik, stop this madness!" that Jerome finally hesitated. His face was flushed, his eyes ablaze with pain and rage. "Get out!" Jerome roared, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Don't ever set foot in my house again." A hushed murmur spread through the small crowd. Everyone understood the weight of those words. It was a severance, a death sentence for the friendship that had once been unbreakable. But at this moment, no one could stop it. The fracture between them had already deepened beyond repair. Malik clenched his fists, his jaw tight with frustration. He stepped back slowly, inhaling deeply to calm himself. Then, with a voice edged in both bitterness and sorrow, he said, "One day, the truth will slap you in the face, Jerome. And when that happens, I won't be here to catch you." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving behind an air thick with unspoken words. The neighbors exchanged uneasy glances, but said nothing. One by one, they dispersed, leaving the yard desolate, steeped in lingering tension. Meanwhile, Lucinda remained by the doorway, arms still crossed. She had not rushed forward to stop the fight, nor had she shown any sign of fear. Instead, a flicker of triumph glimmered in her eyes, as if everything had unfolded exactly as she had intended. Her eerie calmness sent a chill through those who had witnessed it. A moment later, when Jerome turned to look at her, she merely shrugged before retreating into the house, indifferent to the chaos she had just witnessed. Jerome stood in the yard, his chest rising and falling heavily as he tried to steady his breath. The sun still shone brightly, but to him, everything had dimmed. Malik's words echoed in his mind like an ominous warning, but he refused to acknowledge them. He couldn't. His stubbornness, his fear of more loss, and his blind devotion to Lucinda kept him from facing the unsettling truth. He turned back toward the house, his steps slow, his heart burdened. He told himself he needed to protect his wife, or at least that's what he believed. Behind him, the dust from their scuffle settled onto the ground. The olive tree in front of the house rustled in the wind, whispering secrets only time would reveal. Malik had left with the fire of justice burning in his heart, his determination to uncover the truth unwavering. Lucinda, shrouded in her own cold calculations, had a gaze full of hidden schemes. And Jerome, torn, weary, and drowning in denial, was walking deeper into the unraveling of his own home. Would he find the courage to confront the truth behind Savannah's disappearance? Or would he continue to cling to the illusions he so desperately needed? The future loomed uncertain, suspended in the heavy silence of a troubled dawn, like a lost bird crying out in the wilderness. The answer lies ahead. To follow the unfolding mysteries and the fate of these characters, stay tuned for part 2. A cry in the night, a strange dream, a silver bracelet leading Jerome to a horrifying truth. The person he trusted most had cast his daughter into darkness. But within that river, a mysterious being changed everything. That night, as the sky sank deep into the black void, with no stars piercing through the thin clouds, Lucinda suddenly heard a cry echoing through the stillness of the house. This time she knew it was not a mere illusion of her exhausted mind or a lingering nightmare. No, the cry was clear, rising and falling like the lament of a lost soul. A sudden chill swept through her, and Lucinda rushed toward the backyard, where shadows wove through the dense bushes. She followed the sound quietly, her heart pounding wildly, each step dragging an unnamed fear along with it. When she reached the source, Lucinda halted before a heartbreaking sight. Faith, the small child, lay curled up in a pile of old blankets, but there was no longer any sound. Faith slept peacefully, her delicate face serene, as if she were lost in a dream of tranquility amidst the storm of her soul. The stark contrast between the haunting cry that had led her here and the child's stillness unsettled Lucinda deeply. She returned to her room, heart racing, hands trembling as if the fear had not yet faded from her veins. In another corner of the house, Jerome sat awake, unable to sleep, his fingers tracing the silver bracelet, a keepsake brimming with memories and sorrow. He ran his fingertips over the delicate engravings, each groove whispering stories of the past, and felt the invisible thread connecting Faith to Savannah, his lost daughter. Every time he touched the bracelet, Jerome was transported back to the happy days he had shared with Selena, yet at the same time, he was dragged deeper into the abyss of his unrelenting grief. The turmoil within him grew stronger as the horrifying images repeated themselves in his dreams. Lately, Jerome's dreams had become more chaotic and surreal. He often saw a faint figure drifting within the cold waters of the Chattahoochee River, a small child with frail hands, reaching upward as if searching for salvation. But then, amidst the murky haze of his visions, a strange being would appear, a mermaid, half human, half fish, with long, ebony hair glistening under the dim light. The creature would suddenly lift the child from the water, as if delivering a message from the depths of memory and myth. This image repeated over and over, causing Jerome to jolt awake, drenched in cold sweat, his heart pounding with an inexplicable terror. "Perhaps my mind is unraveling," he muttered, trying to calm himself amid the storm of haunting dreams. Yet, as if emerging from the maze of his subconscious, a voice whispered, a deep, alluring tone, "Go to the river. Seek the mermaid." The words slithered through the mist of his memories, like a missing puzzle piece suddenly revealing itself. Jerome could not ignore the unsettling pull. Was something truly waiting for him by the river, an unanswered mystery calling to him? Meanwhile, Lucinda found herself caught between fear and curiosity. She stood by the window gazing out at the yard, her eyes shimmering with unease. Though Faith slept soundly, the cry she had heard still echoed in her mind like the wail of a tormented spirit, refusing to let her rest. She turned away, heart pounding, her mind filled with endless unspoken questions. Was that the cry of the past, or the sigh of a fate that had yet to be resolved? Before the night faded away, Jerome remained engrossed in the silver bracelet, gripping it tightly as if clinging to the last remnants of the past. He could feel the delicate yet unbreakable thread linking Faith and Savannah, as though time itself had never severed them. The visions in his dreams became more than mere illusions. They transformed into relentless reminders, urging him to confront the painful truth that lay hidden between reality and nightmare. And still, in the depths of his sleep, the voice continued to call. "Go to the river. Seek the mermaid." The words were both an invitation and a forewarning, an omen of something miraculous yet terrifying, stirring within him both hope and fear. Though he could not fully understand it, Jerome felt his soul tremble, as if an unseen truth awaited him beyond the riverbank, one that could never be forgotten. As the night wore on, with the gentle wind whispering through the open window and the distant murmur of the river carrying its eternal song, the entire house seemed to sink into a heavy silence, burdened by the weight of longing and loss. Lucinda and Jerome, each lost in their own turmoil, stood between two worlds, one filled with the painful echoes of the past, the other shrouded in the contradictions of the present. Though no answers surfaced, the sounds and images whispered a single reminder. In the stillest moments of the night, souls could intertwine with distant memories, reaching out for truths that had never truly faded. If you wish to uncover what lies ahead, if you want to see whether the mystery of the silver bracelet and the whispers from the dream will lead to the truth about Faith and Savannah, subscribe to this channel and don't miss part 2 of this gripping story. Unable to bear the suffocating feeling of stagnation and uncertainty any longer, Jerome made a quiet decision to leave the somber confines of his home. A fire of longing ignited within him, a relentless desire to uncover the truth. He had heard whispers of a woman named Odetta, a seer who resided near the Florida border, in a small African-American community that still preserved ancient rituals. Odetta was said to possess the rare gift of seeing the past, of bridging the realm of spirits and sacred waters. With his heart weighed down by unanswered questions and lingering sorrow, Jerome embarked on his journey, his determination unwavering, as he ventured toward the remote village where Odetta lived. Throughout the journey, his mind swirled with images of Savannah, his lost child, whose disappearance had remained an unsolved mystery, and the silver bracelet that bound him to his past. As he neared Odetta's dwelling, Memories surged like an unrelenting tide, overwhelming his senses. Finally, Jerome found himself standing before a modest wooden cabin, the humble home of the woman said to wield the power of ancient wisdom. With his heart pounding violently against his ribs, he knocked on the door, feeling as though his very soul was about to leap from his chest. The door creaked open, and there stood Odetta. Her piercing gaze seemed to strip away the layers of his being, exposing every wound, every burden he carried. Jerome felt as if his anguish had been laid bare before her without a single word spoken. Without hesitation, she welcomed him inside, where the soft glow of an oil lamp flickered, casting shadows that danced upon the walls. Seated across from her, Jerome hesitated for only a moment before pouring out his soul. His voice, hesitant yet filled with fragile hope, recounted everything. The sorrowful memories by the Chattahoochee River, the haunting nightmares, the mysterious silver bracelet engraved with the letters SV, and the whispered voices that called to him from his dreams. Odetta listened in silence, her expression unreadable, as her gaze grew distant, as though she were peering into something beyond the physical realm. When Jerome finished, she pressed her lips together, as if holding onto a truth too weighty to be spoken lightly. Finally, after a prolonged pause, she spoke, her voice carrying the weight of ancient knowledge. The place where your child fell was not just a river. It was a vessel of lost souls, a gateway that connects this world to those beyond. I can feel the presence of a powerful mermaid, one who intervened in the moment of fate and saved Savannah's life. Her words struck Jerome like a bolt of lightning, shattering the fragile barrier between his pain and the impossible truth. The world around him blurred, caught between the realms of reality and myth, sorrow and hope. Tears welled in his eyes, his heart pounding with both astonishment and an aching desire to uncover the full truth. Odetta tilted her head slightly, her voice both warm and firm as she continued. Take an offering of white, a symbol of purity and new beginnings. Go to the riverbank, where the spirit lingers, and call the mermaid's name 3 times. If fate has already been written, she will come forth and reveal the truth you seek. Her words carried the weight of prophecy, a sliver of hope piercing through the darkness of his despair. For so long, Jerome had been drowning in the agony of loss. Yet now, a door had been cracked open, a path leading toward redemption and revelation. Jerome felt a newfound resolve ignite within him. He stood, bowing his head in gratitude before bidding Odetta farewell. The road back home was eerily quiet, the humid air of the southern borderlands clinging to his skin. Each step he took felt like an imprint of faith, solidifying his determination to unravel the mystery that had plagued him for so long. The silver bracelet, once merely a relic of his past, had now become a vital key in his journey to uncover the truth. Jerome knew that it would take courage to walk through the threshold of his pain, but he was ready. With a heart fueled by both longing and conviction, he resolved to follow Odetta's instructions. He would bring the white offering, he would stand by the river, and he would call out to the mermaid 3 times, a plea from the past, summoning the presence of the being who had once saved Savannah's life. The weight of uncertainty still pressed against him, yet intertwined within it was hope. 2 sides of the same coin, clashing and coexisting within his mind as he prepared for the next chapter of his arduous journey.
In the early hours of dawn, before the first rays of sunlight could filter through the curtains, Lucinda lay sound asleep in the cold, desolate house. At that moment, Jerome carefully slipped out of bed, his fingers clutching a white cloth, a fragile symbol of hope. He moved with deliberate quietness, as if afraid to disturb the slumbering universe. Passing through the shadowed thickets, he followed the narrow path leading to the riverbank, a place where his soul had once sought solace amid the tempests of life. The crisp morning breeze whispered against his weary face, carrying with it a soothing touch, while streaks of pale orange began to emerge on the horizon, signaling a new beginning. Though the light had yet to fully embrace the earth, a small ember of hope had already ignited in Jerome's heart, a belief that a miracle might unfold, that the past's haunting pain might finally yield to answers. After a long and silent journey, Jerome arrived at a secluded bend in the river where the waters flowed gently, untouched by the world's disturbances. He slowed his steps, kneeling by the shore, and carefully spread the white cloth upon the soft sand. In the hushed embrace of nature, he bowed his head, his gaze heavy with longing and an unshakable desire for truth. His voice trembled, thick with emotion yet resolute in its plea, echoing through the cool morning air. "Mermaid, I am Jerome. Please, come forth and help me." He called out 3 times, each utterance a desperate invocation sent adrift into the vastness of the universe. At first, there was nothing, only the soft trill of early birds and the gentle murmur of water gliding over smooth stones. The world remained undisturbed, as if oblivious to his plea. But then, suddenly, the river's surface quivered, concentric ripples spreading outward, as if mirroring the turmoil within his heart. Small waves lapped against the shore, whispering a tale long forgotten. And within those swirling currents, an ethereal presence began to materialize. Before Jerome's astonished eyes, a vision of breathtaking wonder emerged. A mermaid, her presence casting a spell over the very air itself. Her upper form was that of a strikingly beautiful woman, her deep brown skin illuminated by the dim morning light, her long curly hair flowing with the rhythm of the breeze. Her lower half shimmered with scales of iridescent blue-green, reflecting the muted hues of dawn like a celestial tapestry woven beneath the water's surface. Jerome stood frozen, utterly entranced by her unearthly beauty. The silence between them was soon broken by a soft whisper, her voice carrying a melody that seemed to resonate with the soul of the river itself. "I am Marielle, guardian of the Chattahoochee River. You seek me for the child named Savannah, do you not?" Her words struck like a tide crashing upon the shores of his memory, unraveling emotions Jerome had long buried. Every heartbeat, every fleeting recollection surged forward, overwhelming him with an unbearable longing. Tears pricked his eyes as he fell to his knees on the damp sand, his voice unsteady yet filled with raw desperation. "Yes, please, tell me the truth." In that moment, amid the soft glow of morning light and the whispering wind, Jerome felt the past begin to unfold before him. Marielle, the enigmatic guardian of the river, stood as a bridge between 2 worlds: the present, where pain and yearning reigned, and the past, where the spirit of Savannah still lingered, forever entwined with the soul of the river. Marielle gazed at Jerome with eyes full of compassion, as if the vast sorrow and tenderness of the ocean itself resided within her gaze. She extended her arms, offering comfort amid the storm raging in his soul. From the undulating water, a faint, ethereal blue light suddenly flickered to life. Within that glow, an image began to take shape, carved as if by the hands of memory itself. A vision of Savannah, the innocent child being thrown into the river. Her wide, terrified eyes reflected a silent, tear-streaked agony upon the vast, unrelenting water. Jerome stood frozen, his heart shattering at the horrifying truth unfolding before him. Lucinda, the woman he had once trusted, had deliberately cast his daughter into the river and abandoned her as if she were nothing more than discarded refuse. Marielle parted her lips, her voice deep and rich with mystique. That night, I heard the cries of an innocent child, a wail so sorrowful, like the lament of a lost soul. I rushed to save her from the merciless current, taking her into my hidden sanctuary beneath the river's depths. I nurtured her,
bestowed upon her the sacred life force of the waters, helping her survive the raging storms of fate. When she was strong enough to walk among the world of men once more, I sent her back, accompanied by my prayers and the promise of a mother's protection. Do you recall the girl you recently took in, Faith? Her words carried the softness of the wind, yet bore the weight of the tide, seeping into Jerome's heart like waves crashing upon the shore of long-buried memories. Jerome's breath caught in his throat. His voice, trembling and raw with emotion, barely formed the words, "Faith, she is Savannah." His question hung in the heavy silence, a desperate confirmation of a past too painful to face. Marielle nodded gently, her face both kind and resolute. Yes, her soul guided her back to you, for she was always meant to return. Though she may not remember her past life, the bond between you is eternal. It will never fade with time. A tidal wave of emotion surged within Jerome. His tears fell freely, his body racked with sobs as an unbearable storm of guilt, grief and love consumed him. He collapsed onto the riverbank, his cries echoing through the stillness of dawn. I was blind. I let Lucinda deceive me. I refused to see the truth. If not for this mermaid's mercy, my daughter would have been lost forever to the river's fury, and my dreams, my hopes, would have drowned with her. His words carried the weight of a father's regret, the lament of a soul burdened by irreversible mistakes. Marielle's lips curved into a gentle yet bittersweet smile. Protect her. Ensure that her soul thrives, for in the eyes of the gods, truth always prevails. Let justice take its course. The sins of Lucinda will not go unpunished. She will never find peace. For her cruelty, I have cursed her. No child shall ever remain by her side, a warning against the wickedness in her heart. Her words fell like thunder, heavy, inescapable, a divine judgment etched into the very fabric of fate. Jerome felt the weight of the revelation settle deep within his bones. As Marielle finished speaking, her form gradually dissolved into the water, merging seamlessly with the current. The river returned to its usual tranquil state, as if swallowing the echoes of the past. Yet no force of nature could ever erase the truth that had been unearthed. Jerome remained kneeling at the riverbank, his eyes swollen with grief, his heart caught between anguish, hope, and remorse. In that moment, he understood that no matter how painful, the truth must always come to light, for only then could lost souls find their way home. Jerome stood amidst a tempest of emotions, his heart shattering as the long-buried truth was finally laid bare. He was overwhelmed, but in that very moment, a radiant light of understanding and fatherly love illuminated his soul. In this moment of realization, he understood that Faith, the child who had haunted his dreams and memories, was, in truth, Savannah, his own flesh and blood, the daughter he had believed lost forever to the cruel currents of the river. The agony, the remorse, and the overwhelming love surged within him, making it impossible to contain his emotions. Wiping away the tears and sweat from his face, he turned and ran home, each step heavy with determination, his heart pounding with a mixture of rage and an indescribable burning love. At the same time, inside the dim and shadowed house of the past, Lucinda was restless. She paced anxiously, her movements strained under the invisible weight of fear pressing down upon her. Each time her gaze met Faith's, an unsettling dread surged through her, like whispers of guilt she could never silence. Lucinda had heard the old tales, that those haunted by the spirits of wronged children would soon lose their sanity, their minds consumed by relentless torment. The mere thought of it was like a dagger slicing through her already fragile soul, deepening the abyss of guilt and terror within her. Desperate to escape the nightmare of her own making, Lucinda frantically gathered whatever belongings she could carry, her hands trembling as she tried to flee from the suffocating prison of her past. She could not endure the crushing weight of her own sins any longer. Running away was her only option, away from the house where every wall, every shadow, whispered the dark truth she had tried so hard to bury. But fate would never allow her to escape so easily. Just as Lucinda rushed to leave, the door was flung open. Jerome stood at the threshold, his eyes weary yet burning with something fierce, traces of his recent tears still glistening. And then, in that tense silence, Savannah, stepped forward from the kitchen. No one could have anticipated what would happen next. There, standing in the middle of the oppressive kitchen, Faith carried herself with an air of quiet strength. Though still just a child, her small frame radiated an unshakable resolve, her sharp gaze piercing straight through Lucinda's soul. In that instant, it was as if every hidden secret, every buried truth, had surfaced all at once. With a calm but unwavering voice, Faith spoke words that sent a chilling tremor through the air. "You can't deceive me anymore. I remember now. You were the one who threw me into the river." Her words struck like a thunderclap, crashing into Lucinda with undeniable force. She stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. She could not believe what she was hearing. A child, this child, was accusing her, speaking the very truth she had hoped would never see the light of day. Shaken to her core, Lucinda screamed, her voice echoing through the house in a twisted mix of rage and terror. "You little demon! Who are you? How do you know that?" Her shriek was laced with both desperation and fury, but nothing she said could erase the past, nor could it banish the looming shadow of her sins. Every word she spoke only tightened the noose of guilt around her, forcing her to confront the horror she had long denied. Faith took another step forward, her eyes never wavering. In them burned a light far greater than mere anger. It was something more, something transcendent, as if she had risen above the hatred of those who had wronged her. "I am Savannah, Jerome's daughter, and you committed a terrible act. Now you must face what you have done." Her words rang through the house with an eerie finality, carrying the weight of a truth that could no longer be hidden. It was a proclamation of justice, an undeniable judgment upon the sins of the past. Lucinda stumbled back, her pulse erratic, her breath shallow with panic. The ground beneath her seemed to shift as the overwhelming truth bore down on her, suffocating her with its inescapable reality. And Jerome, watching it all unfold, could no longer contain the storm raging in his chest. He stood there, torn apart by grief, fury, and the raw, aching love of a father who had nearly lost everything. His heart ached as he looked upon his daughter, now standing face to face with the very woman who had tried to erase her existence. In that moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath. The echoes of the past whispered through the house, heavy with sorrow, with guilt, with the cries of a child long thought lost. Savannah, no longer just Faith, but the girl who had been stolen away, had spoken the truth. And no matter how much Lucinda tried to flee, no matter how much she tried to deny, the fire of justice had finally reached her. Her sins could no longer be hidden, and she could no longer run from the reckoning she had brought upon herself. Jerome stood there, silent, amidst the stifling air of the old house, his eyes locking onto Lucinda's with seething rage. It was as if every glance he cast carried the weight of an ocean of resentment. He didn't need to say a single word. His eyes alone spoke of everything in his heart, the pain, the loss, and the betrayal. Lucinda, standing before him, knew in that moment that there was nothing left to hide. The brutal truth had been exposed, and she could feel the crushing weight of her guilt pressing down on her shoulders. Slowly, she sank to her knees, her voice trembling and weak, as though no words could truly capture the depth of her remorse. "Jerome, please. I was blinded by jealousy, watching you constantly mourn Selena and cherish Savannah. I didn't want to live in her shadow forever. I lost control." Her whispered confession was soft yet sharp, like raindrops cutting through the fragile remnants of trust still lingering between them. She clutched her head, her tangled hair cascading over her tear-streaked face, as her body quivered under the weight of her sins. Tears streamed endlessly, each drop marking an unforgivable mistake. "I was wrong. Please, don't leave me. I'm so afraid," she sobbed, her cries echoing through the hollow room, as if trying to soothe the turmoil inside her that could never be erased. Each wail from Lucinda reverberated within the walls, heavy with guilt and fear, making the air feel even more suffocating and oppressive. Meanwhile, Jerome's gaze grew colder, more distant, like a man staring at a stranger who had long since faded from his life. With all the fury in his heart, he pushed her away, as if trying to erase not only her presence, but also the memories they once shared. But no matter how hard he tried, the ache within him refused to fade. "You killed my child. You destroyed my family. I will never forgive you." His voice, sharp as steel, echoed in the room, a final, irreversible judgment passed by a father who had lost all faith in the world. Lucinda's body stiffened at his words, her mind unraveling under the weight of his condemnation. She let out a wild, desperate scream, a wail embodying all the madness, terror, and torment she had buried deep within her. Without hesitation, Lucinda bolted from the house, her frantic footsteps pounding against the earth as she ran through the vast, open fields. The gentle morning light, golden and serene, could not banish the shadows of her past. She ran as if every step was a plea for redemption, an attempt to escape the fate she had carved out for herself. As she sprinted along the path, villagers caught sight of her, her hair disheveled, her hands clawing at her own skin, her voice rising in frantic shrieks. They watched in silence, whispering among themselves, their gazes filled with a mixture of pity and scorn. To them, this was a warning, a grim testament to the darkness that devoured those who carried sins too heavy to bear. But Lucinda paid no heed to their stares. She ran and ran until she vanished into the dense forest to the west, her footsteps swallowed by the vast, unfeeling wilderness. She was never seen again. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some whispered that on a stormy night, she had collapsed near a lonely stream, where the water forever carried the mournful cries of a forsaken soul. Others believed she had fled to Texas, seeking a new life far from the weight of her past. But no one knew for certain. What was undeniable, however, was that Lucinda had paid the price for her actions. Her punishment had been seared into the memory of the town, a grim lesson about justice and the cost of cruelty. And so, beneath the cold expanse of a starlit sky, Jerome stood alone in the silence of an empty house, his mind torn apart by the echoes of past betrayals and unbreakable oaths of vengeance. His gaze remained fixed on the void left behind by the past, where Savannah's presence lingered like a painful memory. Despite the storm of fury within him, one thing burned brighter than all else: the unyielding love of a father and the undying hope of reclaiming his daughter's life. A flame that would never be extinguished. After Lucinda left, the house was drenched in an atmosphere of guilt and despair. Jerome stood silently in the midst of a storm of emotions. Her words, her frantic confessions, had echoed like thunderclaps in his mind, leaving his heart heavy and unsettled. Without uttering another word, Jerome simply fell to his knees on the cold wooden floor, wrapping his arms tightly around Faith, who was, in truth, Savannah, as if holding on to the past that had been lost and the unbearable pain that had torn his family apart. In that embrace, a soft breeze whispered through the cracks of the old house, carrying the warmth of love and regret. His voice trembled, heavy with emotions too deep to be spoken. "My daughter, I'm so sorry for all the suffering you had to endure. I promise to make it right. I will protect you for the rest of my life." His apologies echoed through the hollow house, each word drenched in burning love and an unbreakable vow. Faith, Savannah, though still small, carried an unusual resilience. She knelt beside her father, her tiny arms reaching up to embrace his neck. Her voice, though soft, held the weight of a soul that had endured more than most. I always felt your love, Daddy. Even when I was in the depths of the river, I dreamt of you standing at the shore calling for me. Thank you for never forgetting me. Her whispered words were like a soothing balm on Jerome's wounded heart, a reminder that no matter how deep the sorrow, the love between a father and his child could never fade. Tears mixed with smiles, and in that embrace, something sacred took shape. It was not just a reunion, it was a promise, a yearning to mend the past, a hope for a brighter future beyond the scars that had yet to heal. The emotions rippled through them like gentle waves against the shore, softening the anguish and transforming pain into a fleeting moment of peace amidst the tragedy. From the windows and the quiet corners of their homes, the neighbors bore witness to the deeply moving scene. Their eyes shimmered with tears, their hearts swelling with emotion, unable to contain the sheer weight of what they were witnessing. Every soul watching understood the suffering of a broken family, but they also saw the light of hope rekindled within that father's embrace. Some could not hold back their own tears, their eyes glistening as they shared in the pain and the silent wish for something good to come from it all. As the warmth of reconciliation still lingered in the air, Malik, the faithful friend who had stood by Jerome through every storm, quietly approached. Placing a firm yet gentle hand on Jerome's shoulder, his simple gesture spoke volumes, carrying all the comfort and understanding of a friend who had walked through life's tempests by his side. "Welcome back to the light, my friend," Malik murmured, his voice low and steady, like a guiding force after the darkness of a nightmare. Jerome lifted his gaze to meet Malik's. No words were needed. His eyes alone expressed everything. In that instant, without a single word exchanged, they embraced. A silent, heartfelt embrace that said everything. Thank you, my friend, for standing by me, for helping me weather the storm. That embrace held within it all the warmth, the understanding, and the unspoken apologies of a father determined to atone for his past, for the mistakes he could never undo. In that embrace, all the lies, all the wounds, seemed to fade beneath the weight of love and forgiveness. It was not just a promise Jerome made to his daughter, but also a vow to himself, a solemn commitment never to let the past dictate the future. Malik's presence stood as a testament to redemption, proving that no matter how cruel the world might be, there would always be those willing to stand beside you, rebuilding faith and love from the wreckage. As the empty house fell into a profound stillness, only the quiet breaths and steady heartbeats of a man rediscovering himself remained. Tears of grief and joy intertwined as Jerome and Savannah clung to each other, their whispered words of faith and forgiveness weaving a bittersweet yet vibrant melody. That embrace, though born of past pain, became the threshold to a new beginning, a renewed hope for a future where old wounds could finally heal. A few weeks later, as if the rains had washed away the traces of the past, the atmosphere in the village suddenly changed, becoming brighter than ever. The trees, the fields that had once been desolate and withered, now seemed to awaken with a new energy, a vitality filled with hope. During this time, Jerome decided to take Savannah, also known as Faith, back to his farm as a living symbol of rebirth after tragedy. On the journey home, little Savannah, playful and full of life, was like a refreshing breeze sweeping through the land that had endured so much pain, bringing with her the breath of blessings. Her small footsteps echoed across the fields, signaling a new beginning filled with hope. And indeed, the miracle did not disappoint the villagers. Golden cornfields, vast expanses of cotton that had once dried up, suddenly flourished with vibrant greenery, as if gifted with a sacred vitality. People whispered in awe, saying, "She brings blessings," as if Savannah herself was the spirit of faith, the embodiment of life returning to a land once ravaged by sorrow. From the moment she arrived at the farm, Savannah quickly became a source of new energy for the family. Despite her young age, she was incredibly lively, always running around, helping her father with daily chores like sweeping and tending the garden. The moments they spent together were filled with laughter and warmth, each shared glance and gesture igniting a new sense of hope. In their quiet moments, Jerome took the time to teach her how to water the plants, care for the crops, and even sang lullabies, once sung by her mother, Selena. The melodies not only stirred cherished memories, but also soothed the pain of the past, bringing a comforting promise that everything would gradually heal. At agricultural fairs and gospel gatherings, the sight of Jerome and Savannah quickly became a beloved image among the townspeople. They walked through the village bathed in golden sunlight, with Jerome beaming with pride as he declared, "This is my daughter Savannah. She is my entire world." His words rang out like a solemn vow, a testament to a father who had reclaimed his faith in life. Though the bitter past remained, it had now given way to simple joy and the rebirth of peace. That scene not only revitalized Jerome's farm, but spread hope throughout the village. People from all around came to witness the lush green fields, to hear the joyful voices of the father and daughter, and to feel the warmth of renewed faith. They looked at Savannah as if she were a living miracle, a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and hope. That no matter how much suffering one endures, life can always bloom again in the most beautiful moments. In those fleeting moments, Jerome seemed to rediscover himself, the father who had once drowned in loneliness and sorrow, now basking in the warmth of his daughter's love. He knew that while the wounds of the past could never fully disappear, having Savannah by his side meant that each day brought him one step closer to healing, to a new beginning. The warm embrace of father and daughter, their laughter resonating through the vast green fields, felt like a moving symphony, awakening the hearts of those longing for a miracle. The neighbors, witnessing the scene, were overcome with emotion. They whispered to each other, exchanging thoughts that Savannah was not only Jerome's pride, but also a symbol of blessing, of life returning after the storm of sorrow. Some even believed that thanks to Savannah, this land would be graced with prosperity, abundance, and a bright future ahead. On a radiant evening, as the last light of the day painted the sky in golden hues, Savannah gently asked her father to return to the old riverbank, the place where her soul had once been imprisoned by fear of the dark waters, now replaced by curiosity and fascination. Jerome led his daughter to the river, his heart pounding with emotions, recalling Marielle, the mermaid who had saved Savannah from the depths of past tragedy. Sitting together on a weathered rock by the riverbank, the father and daughter found themselves enveloped in the silence of the moment. A gentle breeze rustled through, carrying echoes of memories. In the soft glow of the sunset, it was as if a delicate song rose from beneath the river's surface, a whisper of nature itself. Savannah smiled gently, her bright eyes gleaming as she whispered, "Daddy?" I can hear her singing. Hearing his daughter's words, Jerome shuddered with emotion, his eyes reflecting profound gratitude. In that moment, he felt Marielle's presence. Whether as a legendary being or a guardian spirit, she remained a symbol of kindness and salvation. "If not for her, I would have lost you forever," he murmured in silence, his heart swelling with love and remorse. Savannah slowly leaned against her father's shoulder, her radiant smile proving that a father's love could weather any storm life had to offer. And now, the story of Jerome, Selena, Lucinda, and Savannah seemed to close in a moment of healing and hope. It serves as a reminder that the power of family, faith, and resilience can triumph over even the most painful trials of the past. Lessons from this story: the eternal bond of fatherhood. Through his heart and intuition, Jerome ultimately realized that a father's love never fades, even when obscured by deception. The consequences of evil. Lucinda, consumed by jealousy and the sins of her past, paid a heavy price. Wrongdoing can never be buried. It will always come to light in time. A heart of salvation. The mermaid Marielle stands as a symbol of kindness, reminding us that every innocent life is worth saving and cherishing. The strength of community. From the compassionate neighbors to Malik, the steadfast friend, those around us play a crucial role in rekindling faith in love and forgiveness. If this story has touched your heart, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. We would love to hear your reflections. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more deeply moving, mysterious, and inspiring tales. And remember, sometimes miracles exist within the boundless love of family and the courage to face the truth. The story of Jerome and Savannah is not only proof of love's strength, but also a reminder that no matter how many hardships life brings, faith in goodness will always guide us to the shores of happiness. Follow our channel to ensure you don't miss the next chapter of this extraordinary journey, where the remaining mysteries will gradually unfold, opening new chapters of faith and redemption.